So as people are coming in, I just want to thank everyone for coming. And I say this at every event I host that I appreciate people getting back on their computers at night after probably spending all day on your computers as a way of like socializing and getting out there. I know it can be hard. And thank you for supporting a small local independent bookstore. For those of you who are not local, Belmont is in the greater Boston area. We are open to browsing. We have a pretty good online ordering system if you want to buy any or all of these authors' books tonight, and we do ship within the US. And if you're local, we're offering free delivery. So feel free to check out the site for more. And we also have a pretty robust events calendar right now because with everything being virtual, it's been a bit of a boon for a lot of smaller bookstores. Tomorrow night we have an event at 7 with Marie Myung-Ok Lee, who's doing a re-release of her book Finding My Voice, and she's in conversation with Mary H.K. Choi. And then next week we have events all week. And the week after that we also have events. So feel free to check out our events calendar. As I'm sure all of you have noticed, the 3 authors on panel tonight are all named Jenny. So things might get a little confusing, but we're going to try to make our way through it. I'm going to use surnames as much as possible. If you have questions for the authors, we're having a Q&A portion. At the end, there is a little Q&A button that should be down at the bottom. It's 2 speech bubbles. You can submit your questions there. And if there's a particular Jenny you want to direct your question to, feel free to mention a last initial or make sure you kind of direct it in some way. And the chat is also open if you want to, comment on things that the authors say and talk to your fellow attendees. We're all here for 3 holiday romances. I have all 3 of them right here. So they're all lovely and wintry and Christmassy. Better than a Hallmark movie, in my opinion, because there's more kissing. So if you're looking at your screen, Jenny Bayliss is in, I think, the top left, and she's got a very wintry holiday background. This is, I believe, her debut adult novel. She currently lives in a small seaside town in the UK with her husband. Their children have left home for big adventures after having been a professional cake baker for many years. She went back to college at age 39 to study part-time for a degree in creative and professional writing. Bayless likes long walks, baking days, stationery, and shamelessly wearing party dresses to the supermarket. I feel like that needs to have photographic evidence somewhere. If there's an Instagram photo we can look at. Jenny Holiday is below Jenny Bayliss. She's a USA Today bestselling and Rita-nominated author. Her books have been featured in the New York Times, Entertainment Weekly, Washington Post. She grew up in Minnesota, but now lives in London, Ontario, Canada. She loves to hang out with her family, watch other people sing karaoke, and throw theme parties. And then Jenny Colgan is in the bottom right. She is a New York Times bestselling author of numerous novels, including The Bookshop on the Corner, Little Beach Street Bakery, Summer at the Little Beach Street Bakery, which were all international bestsellers. She's married with 3 children and lives in London and Scotland. Thank you, all 3 of you, especially because you're all in different time zones. 2 of you, I'm sure, are ready to go to bed, but I appreciate this so much. So let's talk Christmas, I suppose. I think it's interesting that Jenny Bayliss, this is your adult debut. You started with a Christmas novel, a Christmas romance. Jenny Holiday, you have several contemporaries, but I think this is your first Christmas. This is your first Christmas romance?
Yeah, actually my debut it took place at Christmas, but it wasn't really a Christmas novel. That makes sense. It was a little bit of a Christmas novel.
And then Jenny Colgan, you have many a Christmas novel. So you're all kind of at different levels when it comes to the amount of books in your backlist and how many times Christmas has appeared in your books. So why Christmas? We'll start with Jenny Bayliss. Why did your first adult book, why did you want to start with a holiday themed setting?
I think it's probably just because I love Christmas. I'm like a Christmas maniac. From the time when the kids were small, when they used to go back to school in September, they'd go back on like September 3rd, and I'd be like, right now it's Christmas. And I'd just be like prepping. And so it just kind of seemed like it felt very natural that where they always say, write what you know. And so it just kind of felt very right to write about Christmas, because that's where my heart is.
So the minute there's a chill in the air, you're like, decorations are out, music is on.
Well, I mean, I have to rein it in a little bit with the decorations, but this year, how I got around that was when the end of September came, I bought lots of autumnal decorations and decorated everywhere. And then my husband was like, "Oh, this is happening now. Is this how we live now?" And I was like, "Well, it's been a lockdown year, so we just have to bring joy to every season." And and then I just deftly swapped them out for the Christmas ones.
And Jenny Holiday, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all of your previous books, at least the ones that I've read, are set in Canada.
Most of my books are set in Canada.
Yeah, and so this one is New York.
This is not. New York and sort of a Hallmark style fictional alpine micronation.
And Christmas in New York is kind of an experience, you
Mm-hmm.
would say. What did it feel like trying to tackle or like capture what Christmas in New York is like? Have you ever experienced Christmas in New York?
No, I've been to New York many times, but never at Christmas.
It's intense.
Yeah, I tried to put in the backstory. I don't know if you don't want the whole backstory to this book, but this book was kind of started on a whim. Like, this book was not like a joke, like I didn't take it seriously, but it was a little bit of a kind of fun departure for me. And so I just kind of I leaned into the sort of tropiness of it. And part of that was the quintessential New York Christmas. So they go skating at Rockefeller Center, they have snowball fights, stuff like that.
See the big tree, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you like the holidays?
Yeah, I am a big fan of Christmas. I'm not very good at decorating because I'm just sort of not super organized in my domestic sphere. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Christmas. And actually, now I am going to tell you the backstory of this book.
Yes, go ahead. We're all here for
it. It actually starts with my dad, which sounds a little bit odd, but my dad is the biggest fan of Hallmark Christmas movies, like crazy for them. He lives in the US. I live in Canada, where there is no Hallmark channel. So I used to visit him over the holidays, not this year, sadly, and we would binge watch Hallmark movies. And 2-3 years ago, I thought, I wonder if I could write like a book version of one of these, because at this point I was already a romance novelist. Let me just see what happens. And I just sort of accidentally wrote this book, except it's a lot less G-rated than Hallmark, because that's just kind of how I am.
That's usually my main concern with Hallmark movies, is they don't take it far enough for my enjoyment, but that's why I read books instead. Jenny Colgan, you have many a Christmas novel. 1, why do you keep returning to Christmas? And 2, how do you keep your Christmas romances and your Christmas stories from getting stale?
Yeah, I mean, I think we started about 10 years ago, and I'd finished, I think it was Cupcake. I'd written a book about Kathy. And I said to my agent, I think we could do something for Christmas. And really, there weren't Christmas novels then. So she was like, you think? And my publishers offered me a really small amount of money for it, for which I am now very grateful, because I still get money every year. And we did one, and it was so much fun to do, and I really loved it. And I had a carol, playlist and all sorts of things. And so we kind of started doing them. And what's been really interesting over the years is when I quite often, because I write in series, so I like to see, and also the great thing about Christmas, you have a ticking clock, straight away. You have family tensions, and you have something that is, for many people, extremely relatable. So you're starting in an interesting place. But as the years have progressed, every year we've seen it's grown exponentially. We've seen more and more. Jenny B will know, if you look at the Sunday Times bestseller list, which is our NYT, this week it's just full of Christmas novels, is that just like Hallmark movies, people they don't just want to read one, they want to read one every day. And it's just been fantastic to see that people will read, one after another and enjoy them in the same way that you, Jenny H, love watching Hallmark films with your dad. And in fact, I watch the Netflix films with my daughter. She just loves them and would watch them endlessly. So
I feel like Netflix is coming after Hallmark when it comes to like really good holiday films, and they can get away with a lot more, I feel like, than Hallmark can. So I want to know, everyone's holidays are different and what they look like. And I'm always curious if there is a particular part of the holidays that feels really special to you, if there is a tradition that you look forward to every year. Like, for you, what makes your personal Christmas or holiday? Like, kind of your, like, this Christmas is Jenny Holiday's Christmas because it has X, Y, Z.
Me, you want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, this Christmas is a bit sad because a lot of us will be apart from people that we would normally be with. But I think two answers in general. To me, the best and sort of most Christmassy part of Christmas is sitting in the dark by the tree when everyone else has gone to bed in the evening. I don't mean just on Christmas, but in sort of the run up to Christmas, is the sort of peace of a quiet, dark house with lights. My specific tradition that I forced down my family's throat, because we did it when I was a kid, is we always watch Christmas Eve on Sesame Street on Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve on Sesame Street was, I think, from the 70s. And it's sort of classic Muppets. It's, great songs, great stories, very pixelated because it was made for another era. But, I grew up with it on what do they call those? I can't even remember. VHS. Yeah. And then we had it on DVD, and now I have it. I stream it for my family. And, it's I highly recommend. Even if you, it's not even just for kids. It's wonderful. That's my Christmas Eve.
Jenny Colgan, what's your personal favorite Christmas tradition?
I'm particularly bad at when we get the Christmas decorations down. We always buy a decoration from anywhere we've traveled in the year. And so this year it's literally from the stag farm at the end of the road. I think there's a Kelpie. And every year when I take the decorations down, and I'm dreadful because my children are still quite young. I think up until last year, I think we still had a dedicated Santa, truther. So every year I kind of take them out and I unwrap them, and I become this kind of future horrible shadow of myself, kind of really tearful and upset about past Christmases, despite the fact that I'm patently right in the middle of the actual Christmas that we're having at the moment. I'm completely unable to enjoy things without feeling a real nostalgic wrench for what it's going to be like when they want to have Christmas on their own or overseas or whatever. So it's kind of absurd. And then the other one we did yesterday, which is no Christmas songs until the 1st. If one comes on the radio, you have to turn it off. It's the law. And then first thing, 1st of December, Mariah wakes everybody up and we all have a mince pie for breakfast, which I feel is the very few times I would let that happen. I think mince pies are generally breakfast in America, aren't they? But
I don't know. I don't think we have the equivalent of a mince pie. No.
That's true, actually. Well,
I've had like a mince pie, like a Thanksgiving, but yeah, no, never for breakfast. I don't think we have an equivalent.
Yeah, gosh. Well,
I like that tradition. No Christmas music until December 1st. Then Mariah ushers the season in, and we all have a
you're going to get so sick of it. You know, you've got to pace yourself. I really respect Jenny B's. It's September now. I have deep respect for that. But for me, I just want to feel a bit of joy when the Wham video gets shown. And not, oh, nice, here we go.
It's so good. All right, Jenny B, your turn. What is your favorite holiday tradition?
I think it changes as the families got older. Things change. So I think my favorite part of Christmas now is when they come home from their different places, and when they knock on the door and I know they're there and I'm like, oh, they're home, and you just get hold of them because you haven't seen them for a couple of months, and it's just lovely. And then I just feed them relentlessly until they leave again. And so that, and then we always, every year we watch National Lampoon's Christmas. That's like, that's our
so
Christmas
good
movie. So we have to wait till the boys have come home, and then when everyone's ready, then we begin, and then we can so it's, I think things it's changed as things have gone on, and now it's it's them coming home and me making a fuss and then reverting back to being children, really. I
feel like a lot of moms and parents share that same thing, like with my brother being overseas and me being in New England. They're in Florida, so we're not flying back, but there are times when we've surprised our parents and like kept it a secret and like shown up at the house, and my parents live in the middle of nowhere, and my dad is like, what is this strange car coming up our driveway? Like he's ready, like with a gun on the porch in case there's any trespassers. It's like, no, it's just us. It's just us. So that is like North Florida Christmas tradition, is like, please, parents, don't shoot us. We just want to surprise you. So I want to talk individually about your books. I'm going to start with Jenny Bayliss. I really liked this book a lot. And one of the things that first caught me is that the main character is 34.
Yeah.
Which, traditionally in like romance and like these holiday books, the main characters are often much younger. And so I thought that was a good choice. I enjoyed it. But did you kind of like waffle back and forth on the age of your main character, or you knew right from the get-go that you wanted an older?
No, she was always going to be 34. I think it was, I wanted her to be old enough that she was really established in her career, and she could have had some time traveling, and she could have got through a lot of men. And I think I wanted her to be in that position in life where she could really say, I either meet someone or I don't, and that's okay. And I think maybe she had to be, I think maybe when you get into your 30s, that's when you start to feel more comfortable. Well, for me personally, that was when I started to feel more comfortable in my own skin. And now I just feel really comfortable in it. But, so I kind of thought that was a good age for her to be, for what I wanted her to go through.
And I know we talked about this briefly, but this book just came out, and you had a middle grade book come out in October. How was it? Did you work on both of them at the same time, in terms of writing? And what was it kind of like going back and forth? Because your pen name for middle grade is, the last name is Jennings, right? Jenny Jennings.
Yes. So that's my husband's surname, and then Bayless is I'm Bayless Jennings because I just couldn't give up my surname. So it's kind of weird how it happened. I when I went back to uni, so in my last year of uni, I started writing the 12 Dates of Christmas. And in that year also, I had a neck injury, which meant I had to stop baking, so I couldn't do my job anymore. So I was unemployed and trying to find jobs, and obviously I was a 45-year-old baker that couldn't bake, so I was really not having much luck getting a new job. And so I just really focused on writing, and also at the same time I then came around to doing my dissertation. for my degree, and I studied children's literature, and I wanted to write a children's book for my dissertation. So I did that, and then kind of as things evolved, I then managed to get an agent for my adult novel, and then I just kind of said, oh well, I've written this children's book, for my dissertation. Can you have a look at it?
Like a 2-for-1 package.
Yeah, kind of. So yeah, and then another agent in the same agency looked at the children's book, and she said, I'll take that too. And so it kind of happened like that. So it was, I'd been writing since my sort of early 20s, and just nothing, and then two,
it rains, it pours, I suppose.
Yeah.
So Jenny Holiday, yours features like a fictional alpine country, which I always think is very ambitious when authors are like, I'm gonna create my own country in this book and not like name names. What was your inspiration in terms of creating this fictional country? Was it definitely like a Princess Diaries moment with, Genovia? And
I actually think it's less ambitious. I think it's kind of lazy. It's like the cop-out way, because you can just make crap up, right? So the inspiration was I think I've seen the Princess Diaries movie like way back, but I'm embarrassed to say I have not read the book. So it was 100% the Hallmark movie inspiration. Like there are several Hallmark movies that are set this way, and I just feel like because I was kind of leaning into like the story, I hope is genuine and emotional. It's a true romance, but I was kind of leaning into the kind of bonkers in a good way tropiness of it. So yeah, I just made it up.
See, I wouldn't discredit yourself. I totally think making up a country is ambitious, and like getting the details right and then remembering the details that you made about the country.
Well, I guess, but I thought it was the easy way out, because I needed the country to be in some economic trouble, and it needed to be kind of a really small one industry place for her backstory to work. So that was a lot easier than, and also it had to have a monarchy, but not really. It just was easier to just make it up.
So you didn't do any.
It has a monarchy, but it also has a parliament.
Did you like research any like countries to be like, this is kind of what I want to model?
Well, my rough, what I had in mind roughly was not economically, but sort of like Switzerland. It has both French and German. I mean, Switzerland has other languages too, but it has sort of a French and German cultural and linguistic input. So that's kind of what I was going for vaguely in terms of place names and family names and things like that. But other than that, it's just like fictional micronation where they make watches.
Jenny Colgan, one of the things I thought was conveyed very well in your latest book is the like frenetic energy that comes with both running a hotel and running a hotel during the holidays, when there are like special meals and special moments and kind of like everyone just like running around like chickens with their heads cut off, but also dealing with their own personal lives and professional lives, and kind of like letting go of this image that like everything has to be perfect, even though we're trying so hard to make it perfect. Did you do anything special to really capture that energy of like a working hotel?
I write about small business quite a lot. And
yes.
Particularly, and after Meet Me at the Cupcake Cafe came out, I think in 2011, and it was a really big hit in the UK. And for about 3 years, I kept hearing from people that were going to set one up, or did. In fact, there's one in the village next for me called Nicholas Cupcake Cafe. And it was kind of horrifying because it's really very, very difficult to run a catering business. The hours are insane. The profit margins are, well, Jenny B makes cakes, so she knows exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. Unbelievably difficult. You have health and safety, you have VAT, you have tax implications, you have staffing. It's really difficult. And to the point where I always want to put a disclaimer on the front saying, please don't. So there's an element of kind of that in it. It's really, I really, really admire people that go out and set up on their own. In fact, Amanda, like what you do with the bookshop, it is so difficult to do every day, and I am full of admiration for people that do it, because I can only write about it, really. It's I've got one of my brothers is in the catering trade, and I know how difficult it is. So fingers crossed all the hotels and our restaurants all come through next year. I hope they do.
If you had to start your own small business, I know it sounds like a nightmare and you would never, but if your arm was twisted, what do you think you'd want to open?
Well, here's the other thing. Right? I was in it was a woman had opened a cafe for babies and children, and obviously in a very kind of shishy area of London, and I went there with my sister-in-law, and obviously it seemed like a brilliant idea when she was chatting to her friends about it, but of course in practice it was a kind of horrible flurry of kind of covered in flour and screaming, and it was just, and she just looked so tired. And I think it would, so the idea of obviously having a bookshop is pleasant, but I just hate it in the same way that if you listen to your Christmas songs too much, you're going to ruin them. I think that taking anything I loved and kind of then having to do it all day in a way that isn't just type
loses its shine a little bit.
But that's just a different version of what I do now. That doesn't count. I couldn't run a bookshop, but it's a nice idea.
And I just want to remind everyone, feel free to submit questions for the Jennies. We'll be doing that at quarter after, if my math is correct. So I'm curious, the holidays aren't for everyone. A lot of people, there are Grinchy people amongst us who aren't as fond of the holidays. So if you had to sell your book to a Grinch, how would you get them to buy it knowing that they're not fond of the holidays? How would you sell it to someone who's not big on Christmas? We'll start with Jenny Colgan. We'll start with you.
It's perfectly very big and heavy, particularly the UK edition as well. So
I only have the small paperback. I wish we got a nice.
Christmas Day, look how big it is. Christmas Day, you just stick it in front of your face every time they try and get you to put the kid's bloody toy together that doesn't work because the battery's not working, or get you to like run the dishwasher for the 150th time. You can't. You're very busy. And they'll look around the room and they'll look for someone, but they won't find you.
The physical deterrent. I like that sort of sell.
Book-based deterrent. And honestly, also, I can't imagine if you were really very Grinchy about it, you'd be tuning in right now. But go for it.
Jenny H., what would you?
I guess the real answer is I don't think I would. Like, I'm a strong believer in read what you love, and certain books are matches for certain people. But I guess what I would say, if I'm kind of being cheeky, is that the main character of this book is kind of a Grinch himself, and he's the Hallmark thing is a running joke. He's always making cracks about how he's accidentally fallen into a Hallmark movie, and he's not always very pleased about it. So there could be some solidarity there.
It can be pretty meta. Jenny Bayliss, I know this might be an affront to your personal sensibilities.
I think I would just try and lure them with cake. Just kind of say there's cake in the book. She talks about cake, she makes cake, she eats cake, and then there's recipes in the back. So, if you don't
love a good recipe,
maybe you love cake,
do you know if anyone's made the recipes yet, if they've done it on like social media and tagged you or anything like that.
I don't know, no.
Oh,
Oh,
they
now-
will. Actually, Jenny, I will tell you a funny story, which is I once had a recipe that called for, oh God, 25 ounces of something. Might have been raisins, although that sounds like a lot of raisins.
That's
Anyway,
like a lot.
there was a misprint in the Kindle edition, and I heard from about 4 or 5 people saying that they were counting out 250 raisins and they only had 220, or the whole thing was a crap show of gargantuan proportions. So you will hear from people, mostly when it's gone horribly wrong and it's all your fault. And
Well, I was slightly concerned because obviously converting from British measurements to American, and I had no idea the cups. There's different cups for everything. What's that about? So I just had no. So it could have all gone horribly wrong.
big cup, little cup.
So like many Americans, I have become obsessed with the Great British Bake Off. And I started this idea in my head that I would try to do all of the technical bakes on the Great British Bake Off.
Oh.
And I've gone through about like a handful of them, like 5 of them or so. But a lot of the recipes that I find are in British measurements or have very specific ingredients like castor sugar, which we don't really have here. And I just remember it's like, how fine does this sugar have to be? And people are like, just put it in a food processor. And it's like, I don't own a food processor. So have I what?
You've got a mixer though.
Yes, I do have a mixer.
The entire Great British Bake Off.
No, I would never. The worst time is I tried to make, I think it was a creme caramel, and the egg was like literally caramel scrambled eggs is what happened. It was disgusting. It was so gross, which is on me, not on them. But yeah, British baking is intimidating to Americans, I feel like, at least this particular American.
See, I just think it's easier because it's everything's weighed. So I just think that seems easier to me, that you harder to make a mistake. Whereas with the cups, I just get confused. I'm just like, what? I just don't understand. There's so many cups.
The first 2 recipes, I was like, I'll just try to do the math. And someone's like, just get a scale. Just get a kitchen scale.
Yeah.
Alexa's making for this, actually, when your hands are all mucky.
I feel like I'm like the bridge between these 2 cultures, because a lot of things in Canada kind of go both ways.
Yeah, so in Canada, what do they have? Do they have the metric system in Canada? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's what they use.
All
normal countries use the metric system.
Well, we use the metric system except for things like, when we weigh ourselves, we use pounds. I mean, people would know what you meant, but you would never tell somebody that you weighed a certain amount of kilograms. But everything else is metric. It's odd. It's kind of a weird hybrid.
We have to get on board over here.
But we do use cups and things for baking mostly. Okay. But like a Canadian cookbook will have both. It will have cups and grams.
Bless those Canadian cookbooks then.
That's what I need. I'm metric person at all. I lived in Europe for a very long time, and my husband's a Kiwi, so I can't think in imperial at all. So yes, Canadian cookbooks is clearly my only way forward.
Speaking of like cooking, do you have any favorite like holiday recipes at all? I know Jenny Bayliss, you must have something.
Yes, there's well, I have various things that I like to do. They normally come from Nigella Lawson, to be fair. But she does these little peanut butter cups that everyone can just devour. And even if you're, you can make them vegan, which suits the vegans, and then you can make them, and they're gluten-free. So, and because my family all have various dietary requirements, thankfully not nut allergies, so the peanut butter cups go down a storm. So I always make hundreds of the things, So yeah, they're always a good thing. But generally, you could flick through any page of the Nigella Christmas baking book, and there'll be something sticky on the page from where I've made something from it.
Jenny Holiday, do you do any special treats?
Yeah, the big tradition in my family is pumpkin chiffon pie,
Ooh.
which is I'm not a fan of pumpkin pie, but this is my grandmother's recipe. So I grew up eating it, and when she died, she left. It was on a card that somebody scanned and sent around to the family. And the joke is that there's this one step that just never works. You're supposed to stir the sort of custard stuff until it thickens, and it literally never thickens. So everyone just kind of stir it for a while, cross your fingers. There's raw eggs in it. We'll see if it works out. But no one's dead yet. But it's a very light pumpkin kind of custard. So it's like the flavor of pumpkin pie, but really silky. You whip egg whites and fold them in at the end, and then you top it with a layer of cream. Oh, it's so good.
Jenny Colgan, any delicious holiday food?
My favorite Christmas we ever did, we were living in France, and so the weather was still quite nice in December, and we had all our friends and relations round, and we roasted a whole pig in some bricks in the garden, and it was so brilliant and so hilarious and just kind of slightly mad, but also terrific. So very happy memory. Also in France, they sell all the birds with the heads on, so you really got to get at it.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Fortunately, my husband's quite roughy-dufty with this kind of thing, pigs, geese alike. Yes, with slightly more colourful sections I like.
Well, with Jenny Bayliss and Nigella Lawson, I usually go hard with Dory Greenspan's cookbooks. She has this one, it's like Dory Greenspan's like book of cookies, and it's a brick of a cookbook, and it's just all of these different cookies, and they're just so good. I think I made like 5 different ones last year. It's just like a stressful time. It's like, I'm gonna make 50 cookies in an afternoon because that's where we're at. So I know you all just had books come out recently, but I want to know what you all are working on next. And I'm sure you get that question a lot. You're like, what do you mean? I just came out with a book. What do you, I don't know. Jenny Holiday, what do you have next coming up?
I have coming out March 9th a book called Sandcastle Beach that's from a different series called Matchmaker Bay. It is the 3rd book of that series, but it's a standalone, and it's I joke that I am pioneering. I am the #1 in the category that only includes me of Canadian beach town romance. So it's set on in a Great Lakes beach town, a fictional town, Amanda, on Lake Huron. And it's just sort of like a Gilmore Girls-esque small town with some, meddling old people. And this is the 3rd book of that series.
I do love a meddling, like kooky grandma or aunt, because they have nothing better to do.
Right.
Yeah. Jenny Colgan, do you have anything coming up after this one? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I spent a lot of lockdown playing the piano because it's something I like to do, and it was a really good opportunity to get on ahead of it. But my piano teacher stopped teaching, not on Zoom, not at all. And so one of my children has a piano teacher who kept teaching on Zoom. And so I borrowed him a couple of times to teach me. Anyway, he was just a very unusual character, immensely large kind of character, Eastern European, very loud, very funny. And then that was it. We had 2 computer lessons, and then everything stopped for the summer. And I thought, he's hilarious. This would be interesting. And so I kind of adopted I don't know him, I never met him, but I adopted the idea of a very extrovert, gregarious piano teacher and quite a shy person. And then, so that's the book that's coming out. It's called I can't remember what it's called. Sunrise on something, I don't know. It's all a big debating committee titles. However, the slightly awkward twist in the tale is that in August, when the schools went back, he got in touch and he said, I can teach again. Do you want to come back? And he is a really, really good piano teacher. And I went back, and he's not at all like the character I've written in the book, but now it's going to look really awful, and I'm he's absolutely dreading him or his lovely wife, who is French, and I do a lot of business in France. Oh, I can't even think about it.
So does he know at all, or you're just worried he's going to stumble upon it?
No, and I can't, it's really, oh God, I'm terrified. Fortunately, he speaks a language, one of the languages into which I'm not translated, which is excellent. Excellent news. So I can't, because it's not him, but there might, there are one or two vocal tics that would be very recognizable. So I'm kind of looking forward to that coming out, and also kind of living in a deep, deathly horror. Oh, meanwhile, of course, I have my old piano teacher who's also going to who absolutely reads everything I do, who's going to also think it's him, just by virtue of not even knowing about my secret new piano teacher. It's a nightmare.
So he could feel flattered or betrayed that you're writing about another piano teacher.
Oh God! It's just I've kind of got like two adulterous piano teachers. It's terrible. My piano playing, so it's almost worth it.
You're gonna have to quit piano now. I think you're gonna have to like take up the tuba or something.
I'm just gonna run away to sea and never be seen or heard of again. I think at this point.
That is exactly what I would do. I say.
Run away to sea. Anyway, it's coming out this April is marching upon us. So ho hum. It would be very funny if the Bulgarian rights did actually come up.
You're like, no, just skip those.
No Bulgarian. Oh my God. Anyway, right. So that's what we're doing. It's very jolly though. The book's hilarious.
Sounds good. Jenny Bayliss, do you have anything next?
Yes, I've got a second novel that I've been working on. So that's kind of at the editing stages at the moment. That's called A Season for Second Chances. Not Christmas, but it is autumn because I couldn't stray too far away from Christmas. And I thought about writing. Well, I thought about writing about summer, and then I just thought, no, I just spend the whole time complaining about, sort of sweaty boobs and that I can't, I'm menopausal. And so I thought, no, I'm just not in a good place at the moment to write about summer. And I've also got another children's book coming out, which is the second in that series. So yeah, next year there'll be 2 books.
Look at you go. You'll be the next Jenny Colgan with like dozens and dozens of books to about. So if anyone has questions for any of the authors, feel free to pop them into the chat. This has been so charming and delightful. I'm so fascinated, Jenny Bayliss, about one, baking, because for a small time I thought I wanted to have my own bakery, and that dream quickly died. And the fact that you went back to school at 39.
Yes, well, because I think I said earlier, I've been writing since I was in my 20s, and I really couldn't, and I'd send things off to publishers and agents, and they would always say things like, it always seemed to be like a near miss. They'd say, it's just not quite there. It's just not. And I thought that was just a no, but then I realized that actually I needed to work out why it was never quite making it. So I thought, well, I've got to, either do it now or I never do it. So I did it part-time. So it did take 6 years, so that I could carry on working. And I did that, and all the lecturers were published authors. So it was great because what I actually needed was for people to lean over me and then look at my work and say, that's lovely, now cut it by 30%. And that was what I needed. And so I kind of got trained in cutting things down. And yeah, so that was kind of that it was the perfect thing for me to do, because then as soon as before I graduated, I then had a book deal.
I think we all need a nice British professor to like lean over us and be like, that's great, but So Alora wants to know, for all of you, are there any books that you revisit every year around the holidays? We'll start with Jenny Holiday. Is there any rereading that you tend to do around this time?
I am so not a rereader at all. It's like a character flaw. Even if I like a book, it's like once I read it, I'm not allowed to read
You're
it
done.
again. I don't know. So no, I really don't. That's terrible. I went through a phase in my 20s where I actually thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to start doing this. And I bought a copy of The Gift of the Magi. And I think I read it like out loud to, at that time, it was a boyfriend, for like 2 years. And then I gave up.
You're like, that's enough.
So
We're done.
That's the true answer. Sorry, that makes me.
No,
I feel like
I'm
that
not
paints me in an unflattering light, but no.
I'm not a rereader either because I tend to second guess my enjoyment. And I'm always afraid that I'll go back to a book that I loved and be like, what was I thinking? Like, this is
Well, and
terrible.
that's a real risk, especially if you go back to books from childhood.
Never. I want to keep it in its little bubble where it
Yeah.
belongs in my brain and just keep it where it is. Jenny Colgan, do you reread anything around the holidays?
Yeah, I don't think you do read the same book twice. I don't think you ever do. I certainly remember reading Anne of Green Gables really stands out, which was a book I loved as a child that I thought was
Oh my
hilarious.
God.
And it's actually a terribly sad story about Marilla. It's Marilla, isn't it? This woman who's just somehow missed out on love altogether and how she learns to love it. It's an extraordinary book from a different adult perspective. But yes, every year we do The Dark is Rising. I can't read it anymore. Alex Jennings, who does the audio book, is the best audible reader in the world. So at the moment, we're all kind of sitting in the car as long as possible to get. So that's from the Susan.
My son and my husband are reading that together right now.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, but I've never read it, but maybe I should get in on their party.
Terrific. It's the whole series is terrific, but that's the one, and it's very Christmassy and very frightening, and it's brilliant. It's really good.
Frightening and Christmassy. I'm into it. Jenny Bayliss, any rereading?
Yes. So there's a book by Georgette Heyer called, I think it's called The Christmas Party or A Christmas Party. I should know this because it's one of my favorite books. And it's like we over here we call them cozy murders, but I think you call them cozy mysteries.
Yeah.
And it's basically that whole beautiful big old country house, and all the glamorous people get together, and then one by one they get bumped off, and it's at Christmas, so Christmas murder, what could be better? So so I really like that. I love that kind of thing. If there's anything that's got a manor house and a murder, I'm all over that. So yeah, that really works for me. So I'm going to read that again. I'm really looking forward to getting into that.
Have you checked out, is it Snow by John Banville? You might like it. It's a wintry like house murder with like a detective or like an inspector.
Oh,
So it's a relatively new release. It's called Snow, S-N-O-W.
Oh, okay. I'm going to look that up.
Yeah. Elaine has a question. How does a book first come into your head? And what is that process like, going from kind of like idea to writing something down? Jenny Colgan?
I don't know. You just start thinking about characters or location. Location's very important to me. So, if I'm thinking about my Scottish Island series, then I'll be thinking about what people are doing. No, I just kind of like to take some characters for a walk. When I start, I tend to throw in more people than I know will still be standing halfway through the book, and just to see who catches my attention, who I think is funny, who I think is interesting. So I kind of like to stick a bunch of people of varying ages and types together and kind of see what sticks, really. So,
Jenny Bayliss?
I think stories kind of, they tend to sort of pop in there, and I don't generally ask them to go there, but they do, and then they have to kind of marinate for a while. so I have my thinking time, but they always seem to pop in when I'm either cleaning the bathroom or I'm in the shower, which is really weird because I have a really uninspiring bathroom. It's just completely white. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's the white. It's the snow thing. But yeah, so I don't know. They just kind of pop in there, and then I see what happens.
Jenny Holiday?
I think the answer is a bit different if it's most of my books are in series and are sold in series. So I usually if you're talking about like the beginning of a series, book one, it usually, and I don't really know how it happens, but I usually end up with like I have a bunch of, it's almost like a card catalog. I have a bunch of sort of images in my head. Some of them are I still have, I've never written about, but they're kind of like, I call them kernels of stories. So they are like kind of clear snippets of scenes. And they may or may not make it into the book, but they're sort of like the kernel of a book. And that is what becomes usually a book one for me. In this case, it was the idea, I mean, this was a little different because I kind of dared myself to try this, but I had this image of a princess hailing a cab in New York. So that was the image of the kernel of this book. But then the subsequent books in the series, like if a publisher wants to buy more than one book, then you actually have to kind of more overtly think, okay, like what other stories are going to exist in this universe and how are they going to be connected? That one is, that's more, it's a little bit less mystical, you know? It's a little bit more like hard work to do that part for me.
So Karen has a question for Jenny Bayliss. Which of the 12 dates in your book was the most fun to write?
I really liked the cocktail date. I just liked the idea of two strangers just getting really steadily more drunk on really obscene named cocktails. I had a lot of fun writing that.
So we have a question from Barry Walsh about what do you think is the most important ingredient to writing a romance in a book? What has gotten to be right if the book is going to succeed? We'll start with Jenny Holiday.
I don't know. I am not the most self-reflective writer, and I'm not a critic, so I kind of always bumble through questions like this because I'm not very self-reflective on the process. But I guess I would say that for me, a romance is obviously about the romance. There's a happily ever after, but as important as that is to me, so is the character arc that each character goes on. Like I want my romances to be about people becoming better, and it doesn't have to be a big dramatic thing, but evolving in some way as humans or family members or friends or you know, getting through some shit, excuse the language, that may be triggered by the romance, like the romantic interest may be the sort of what starts this journey, or they may not, but that journey ultimately happens in parallel but independent of the romance. That's what I will try to do, and that, to me, that's important.
Jenny Colgan, what about the romantic elements in your books? What has to be?
The man is really, really important for romance. I think there's a very fine line between being someone that's quite buttoned up and being an absolute dickhead. So you've got to dance along that quite carefully and make sure that you have somebody that feels rounded and kind and not. I have a real issue with romance novels where people are, the chap is very, very perfect and just kind of hanging around waiting to fall in love with someone. Because that's not that we're necessarily writing real life, but it's really not what happens. You know, people fall in love by accident, and it's absolutely lovely and charming and surprising, and that's what you're trying to capture rather than a kind of, you know, billionaire wandering past in a strong wind. So I work really hard on the chaps, whether they're kind or funny or quiet or whatever type, and less so on my main character, my female character, because when I read fiction to escape, I like to in a funny sense, almost put myself in the book. So I don't, and I think a lot of readers do too. So I don't go massively heavy on you know, everything that you need to know about the heroine. I think she's much more sketchy, because I like to think that you could feel, or certainly when I'm reading or when I'm watching a romantic comedy, I like to think, oh yeah, this could happen to me. This could be what it's like. So I work very hard on the chap, but I'm not so prescriptive about the woman or the other chap, depending on what kind of romance I'm writing. With the idea that you can kind of much more insert yourself into the story than you would otherwise.
When you mentioned a billionaire coming by in a strong wind, I just pictured him like tumbling like a piece of like newspaper or trash just down the street. Jenny Bayliss, what about you?
I think this is a really tricky question for me, because this is my first book. So, you know, basically I don't know what I'm doing yet. And you know, it may or may not work out. So I don't know. I think I just really tried to write characters that I felt were kind of three-dimensional, you know, that could be people that were flawed, and, you know, but also they, you know, they had stuff going on, and I tried to make it romantic, in things that I thought were romantic, because I tend to be more about small gestures rather than big gestures. I've never been a person that's been the one for the, you know, for the big romance. I always think it's the little everyday things for me. So I tried to kind of, I suppose, put things in that I would think were romantic. But again, you know, I am literally learning on the job. So, you know, I could have got it all wrong. I just don't know yet.
So Lynn has a question for Jenny Bayliss and Jenny Colgan about whether your books are altered at all for the American market. So Jenny Bayliss, did you have to change anything?
It is smaller. I hadn't really realized how much, because the editorial team at Putnam are really great, and they kind of, you know, took care of all of that. And so I kind of sent them my, you know, initial book, and but it is smaller. There's a much less word count in the American one than there is in the British one. So yes, I don't know why that is.
Did they tell you?
No, I didn't know until I was like, this seems small.
Goodness, I wonder what it was. My doing a full set of British edits and a full set of American edits twice a year was killing me. So my agent, Station Intervention, and now my brilliant London editor and my brilliant New York editor work together and present me with one edit. So they can kind of argue the toss about what goes in. But I do, because I'm very specific when I write, whether I'm writing about Scotland or about Cornwall or about, you know, I'm a very local writer. So, you know, there's stuff that you would have to, in Scotland, you know, if you go from one island to another, then the people won't be able to understand each other depending on the dialect they speak. So yeah, no, a lot of British writers get an American edit, and I'm very lucky in that I only get one, and all the horse trading's done while I'm not around. So you get the same with different spelling.
Physically, they're different. Like, we saw your copy; it's humongous.
Well, this will be out in paperback next year. This is just hardback this year.
Yeah, but I don't think we even get a hardcover option. Yeah.
It's just.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do they, for the other two Jennies, so your books are set in the UK. Do the American versions have UK spelling or American spelling?
American.
Yes, it's American.
And they'll leave things like pavement, you know, things that could generally be understood, or autumn, for example, rather than fall. But they'll occasionally faff about with things like a fringe. You know, there's occasionally, not that I reread my American editions, but you will occasionally come across a very small, you know, people don't change the gear stick very often, that kind of thing.
Right.
So the last question we have is from Elizabeth. And she says, Jenny Colgan mentioned that she wrote her first Christmas book using a song list of carols and other songs. Do any or all of you use music or playlists when you write? Jenny, we'll start with you, or Jenny Colgan, we'll start with you.
Well, not usually when I'm working, because I'm usually in a coffee shop, but when I'm editing, I have a lot of very repetitive Philip Glass style music that a lot of writers use to get yourself into a rhythm of working. But I do occasionally have playlists. I did have a playlist for the first couple of books. And then because the new one is about a piano teacher, so I have a piano playlist, which is kind of nice. But while I'm actually working, no, just chuntering. I like working on trains, planes, that kind of thing.
Jenny Holiday, do you listen to anything when you write?
Hilariously, when I write, I usually write in silence, but if I'm feeling kind of like I need a little like pep, and I've done this for years, this is not a Christmas thing, I write to the Mannheim Steamroller Christmas album. Do you know what this is? It was like I don't even know. It's another thing I grew like 80s sort of fake electronica pop.
Yeah, like lots of synthesizer.
Yeah, like and it's very peppy, but there's no lyrics. And I've written to this for years. Like, and a lot of my books are set in beach towns, but I write to this Christmas album. So this book came around, and I was like, finally, I'm writing to like thematically appropriate music. And the hilarious thing is that if you subscribe to Spotify, at the end of the year, it tells you what your most, whatever. My number one artist is Mannheim Steamroller, which is not, true in like terms of my taste, although, I will defend them until my dying day, but it's because it's just on a loop because I type to it.
Actually, do you know, I wanted to quote from, I love Sufjan Stevens's Christmas album, and I wanted to just use a line from it, and as the other writers will know, permissions is a horrible thing. But I contacted him directly. It was kind of the early days of Twitter where you could do stuff like that. And he went, oh, sure, yeah, that'd be great. He sent the nicest message back. And I literally got a legal letter about 2 days later from his team saying he doesn't own his own songs, So I couldn't use it. But I think Sufjan makes a wonderful Christmas album. Although the Mannheim one, obviously, I'm off to listen to immediately.
I don't really recommend it for real life, but
for real life.
Oh, now you're backtracking now.
No, the best Christmas album for real life, for sure, 100%. I will fight anyone on this. Is Annie Lennox, A Christmas Cornucopia.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Okay.
Everyone's like,
okay, all right. Jenny Bayliss, do you listen to anything when you write?
Sometimes I listen to classical music because the kind of music that I would listen to, for fun, I like musicians who tell stories, like in their work, like Billy Joel, Taylor Swift, and people like that. So, and I find I can't, but because I'll then be thinking of their story, I then can't concentrate on my story. So I have to have no words if I do listen to music. And in my real life, outside of lockdown, I would be in a cafe, and I like lots of different people's voices, because that helps me. Their voices kind of help me to drown out. I don't know what it is, but anyway, the lots and lots of noise really helps me concentrate. Unless I'm sitting quietly and my husband sneezes, and then I'm like, oh my God, now I can't work. So yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird the way the brain works.
Well, I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you to all three of the Jennies for joining us, for staying up past their bedtimes for some of them. This was so lovely and wonderful. I have a link in the chat to Belmont Books if you want to order their books there, or at your local independent bookstore. If you can, support your local businesses who are having a hard time at the moment. And of course, if you're in need of some Christmas cheer, all three of these books are just charming and delightful, and I recommend all three of them. So thank you all so much. And thank you to the three Jennies.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.